So we're going to talk about factoring, but it's going to be a little more intense than the factoring that we did back in chapter 4 with quadratics. So if we remember from way back when, the first thing we need to check for when we are factoring is a greatest common factor. So if we have a greatest common factor, the first thing we're going to do is factor out a greatest common factor, and then see whatever we have left, see if that can factor. We're going to keep factoring and keep factoring and keep factoring until we can't factor anymore. So if we look at this first example, if we see that each term has an x in common, so our GCF here is going to be x, and we're going to factor an x out of each of these. So when we do that, we're left with x squared plus 4x minus 12. Well, if we look, this trinomial right here, this can still factor, because we need factors of 12, which are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 4.
Please report to the attendance office. Naomi,
We need two numbers. We need two numbers that are going to add up to positive 4 and multiply to a negative 12. Well, that's a negative 2 and a positive 6. So it's going to factor to x minus 2 and x plus 6. And then that's the furthest we can factor that. For this next one, well, we see that each one has a 2 in common, and we can also take out a y cubed from each of them. So when we factor out a 2y cubed, we're left with y squared minus 4. Well, we can see that y squared minus 4 can factor. Because if we look, there's no middle term in here, so that means our middle term is 0. So we need two numbers that are going to multiply to negative 4 and add up to 0 since there's no y term. Well, that's going to be y plus 2 and y minus 2. Okay? If you remember back from when we factored quadratics, we called this a difference of two squares. Okay, and we did a lot with that earlier on in the year. It's the difference of two squares there. This next one here, if we look, they all have a 4 in common, and we can also take out a z squared from each. When we do that, we are left with z squared minus 4z plus 4. So now look at this trinomial. See if this can factor. So we need two numbers that multiply to positive 4 and add up to negative 4. Well, that's going to be z minus 2 and z minus 2. And you can also write this as 4z squared times z minus 2 squared. Either way works, whatever you prefer. Alright, now we have the sum of two cubes here. Alright, so if we take a look at our notes here, the sum of two cubes and the difference of two cubes, we use the same formula. The only thing that's different is this negative sign here. So when we talk about sum of two cubes, our negative sign is going to be in our trinomial. It's going to be in the middle term of our trinomial. But if we're talking about the difference of two cubes, our minus sign is going to be in our binomial. So the sum of two cubes and the difference of two cubes, the only difference between the two is where this negative sign goes, because you can only have one negative sign in each of them. So if we looked at this example here, let's just ignore all this for right now. We have a cubed and b cubed here. We need to find out what a is and what b is. That way we can take a and b and just plug it in this formula, and we're off and running. So we need to get from a cubed to a, we have to take the cubed root of it. So we need to take the cubed root of 8, which is 2, and the cubed root of x cubed, which is x. And then the cubed root of 27 is 3. So now we can take a look at this here, and we see that we have a plus b. Well, a is 2x, b is 3. So we have 2x plus 3 times a squared, which is 4x squared, minus AB, so 2x times 3 is 6x, plus b squared, which is 3 squared, which is 9. Alright, it will also help to know what the cubes are. So 1 cubed is 3, 2 cubed is 8, and so on. Remember, you can pause this at any time to make sure you get everything wrote down. I would definitely write down these cubes though, that way you have them. Alright, so for our first example here, we have a cubed plus b cubed here. So we need to take the cubed root of each of them to find what a and b is. So the cubed root of x cubed is just x, and the cubed root of 27 is 3. And we need to use the formula a plus b times a squared minus ab plus b squared. So I'm going to have x plus 3 times x squared minus a times b, which is 3x, plus b squared, which is 9. Now we need to ask ourselves, does this trinomial factor? So we need factors of 9, two numbers that are going to multiply to 9 and add up to a negative 3. Well, factors of 9 are 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. Can 1 and 9 get us negative 3? No. Can 3 and 3 get us negative 3? No. So that does not factor anymore, so we are finished. One thing you will notice, this trinomial, when we are doing the difference in sum of cubes, it will never factor. So after you plug a and b into your formula, you should be done after that. And the next one here, once again we have a cubed and b cubed. Well, if we take the cubed root of 64n cubed, we get 4n, and if we take the cubed root of 125, we get 5. So once again, plug it into your formula. 4n plus 5. Then we need to take a and square it, so we have 16n squared minus a times b, which is 20n, plus b squared, which is 25. And we are finished with that. So you might want to keep referring back to that formula. Make sure you memorize that formula. And once you get the formula memorized and the cubes memorized, you will be sailing pretty smoothly through this. So now we have the difference of two cubes. As you can see, there's a minus sign in between these now. Okay. The only difference between these two formulas here is that the minus sign now is in our binomial for the difference of two cubes. If you remember that the sum of two cubes, our minus sign was right here, and this was a plus sign, but for a difference of two cubes, this is minus and this is the plus. That is literally the only difference between the two. So once again, we have a cubed and b cubed. So we'll take the cubed root of y cubed, and we get y. And the cubed root of 64 is 4. So we have a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. So I'm going to have y minus 4 times y squared plus 4y plus 16. And once again, if you try to factor this trinomial here, it will not factor. So once again, you do not have to factor, or the trinomials will never factor when we are doing the sum and difference of cubes. Next one here, we have 8a cubed minus 216. So we have a, which equals 2a, and b, which equals 6, because the cubed root of 216 is 6. So once again, we're going to do a binomial and a trinomial here. And in our binomial, since it's a difference of two squares, we have our difference of two cubes. Our minus sign will be in the binomial. Now we're going to have a squared, so we have 4a squared, plus a times b, which is 12a, plus b squared, which is 36. Once again, next one, this is a difference of two squares again. So a is going to be 3g, and b is going to be 7. So since there's a difference of two squares, our minus sign is going to be in our binomial. And then we have a squared, which is going to be 9g squared, plus a times b, which is 21g, plus b squared, which is 49. And last one, here we have the sum of two squares, so that means our negative sign will be in our trinomial, the middle term of our trinomial. So a equals 3x and b equals 8. So we have 3x plus 8 times a squared, which is 9x squared, minus 24x plus 64. Okay, and then that last one we will talk about in our next video. But just keep in mind that we need to get that formula memorized, and then we also need to get our cubes memorized. And after that, we'll be smooth sailing, and these problems should come pretty easy after that.